What happened today? What was your day like today?
What was my day like today? Busy, as always, fast-paced. I got the opportunity to offer some pretty exciting jobs for new positions to individuals, and so just really excited to see how that plays out. And worked a couple big contracts today, so just another day in the life.
Nice. Well, okay. So, what time do you typically like wake up in the morning? Do you have like a set schedule? I'm sure you've got to have some kind of structure. And
I have a super regimented morning. Nothing good happens for me at night. All the good stuff happens in the morning. So I get up at 4:30 in the morning, and I am ready to go put together by 5:30 in the morning. And then I've got the time from 5:30 to 6:30 to myself, to read, to meditate, to pray. And then 6:30, the show starts with the kids. By 7:30, they're off to school. And by 8 o'clock, I'm at my office.
Wow. And how many kids do you have?
3 kids. I have 2 boys and a girl, Ethan, Connor, and Cora. They are 9, 7, and 6 years old.
Wow. So that's got to be quite the task to get them up and going. Are they going to school already?
They are. They're in a private school, and so their school is, of course, governed by church, not state, so they've been open. I didn't send my kids back right away when school started because I just wasn't convinced that you could be in this atmosphere safely. But their school has done a phenomenal job of keeping the kids and the teachers and the faculty and staff safe. And so they went back, I'd say in November.
Okay.
And I think that was good for them. I mean, I think homeschooling was kind of good for them in some ways. I mean, it's definitely a different perspective. I was really stressed and nervous about it. One, because I do not think I was built to be a teacher, although everybody's still passing, and I think we're going to advance to the next grade. So yes. I guess it worked out okay. But I was concerned about it. I wasn't really built that way. And then it's 3 kids doing homeschooling at the same time, different, content, but it's all happening at once. And then, there was still work. And certainly, back then there was a whole different level of uncertainty regarding the pandemic. But I just kind of chose to say, this is probably the closest I'm ever going to come in my life to being a stay-at-home mom. And it can't last forever. I didn't know we'd still be at it a year later, but it can't last forever. And so I choose to embrace it. And so it was really fun. It was really great. But they did go back in November, and I think that was important for them from the socialization aspect. Kids' worlds, it's so small. They've got home, they've got school, they've got church, and you strip 2 of those things away, and now the world really, really shrunk. And they're social individuals just like we are, just the same way we missed company and friends and outings, early on in the pandemic, so did they. And so I think it was really good for their mental and emotional health to be able to get back into community with their friends and their teachers. And
it's really important for kids, like no birthday parties, no hanging out. I mean, at least as adults, I don't know about your children at that age, but at least we have like our phones and social media to stay in contact. But with kids, I mean, it's school and maybe friends and neighborhood kids, and that's pretty much about it, right? Especially during all of the pandemic stuff. So that's cool that they're kind of back up and at it.
Yeah, they're excited about it for sure.
And what about things at all of the dealerships? Like, how are you all doing at all of the dealerships? What's the last year been like for all of those?
Praise God, Jerry, it's been great. The dealerships have been doing phenomenally. The beginning of the pandemic was really challenging for all of us, but mostly because of uncertainty. You didn't know what to expect. I can still remember March 13th sitting in a side chair in my living room watching the news thinking, oh man, I'm not prepared for this. Ask me what to do. And, when the market changes or when there's inventory shortages or supply chain issues, and I can answer those questions, but a global health crisis, I have no idea how we're going to navigate this, which was a moment, right? So that's a moment where you realize we don't have a plan for a global pandemic, and clearly we need one. And so we got to putting one together, and might have taken it a little too far. We called it our emergency management protocol, but it went into phases. And, this was, current status, phase 1. And then, progressively looking forward to what could happen, that plan got a little more intense, and we had some long, late phone calls with our executive team members explaining to them, this is what this is going to look like if the future goes this way or that way, and just trying to be prepared for every circumstance when you realize you're prepared for absolutely nothing that's going on. And so there was some pushback in the beginning from our team members, from customers, from vendors, from everyone who we were all together getting used to this new norm of the social distancing and the face mask. And, was it going to be elective? Was it not elective? Were you an essential business? Were you not an essential business? Did a business have the right to mandate that you wore a mask? Did not, right? So there's just a lot of curiosity and uncertainty to navigate. And so those first few months were a little challenging, and I think everybody got used to it. And as you saw things getting worse, around the country and around the world, I think everybody had a greater appreciation for some of the things that we instituted very early on, and really fell in line with that. And funny enough, now we find ourselves wearing the mask all day and realizing we hadn't taken it off, and it's just become so normal.
Yeah, sometimes I'll go to the store and then I'll keep my mask, and now it's just become so normal that I'm like driving around and I'm that dude driving by himself in the car, and I still have the mask on. I'm like, oh crap. Yeah,
I did that the other day too, and I was like, man, I could have been breathing freely this whole time.
I know. And it's definitely been a change, and now that we're kind of coming out of it too, I kind of feel like some of this stuff is kind of I've taken some of the good stuff out of the pandemic and really embraced it, and it's nice to be kind of going back to what used to be normal, but it's kind of different, right?
I think it's going to be a new normal. I don't think we're going to go back to normal. I think we're going to have a new normal. I think certainly a lot of good things did come out of the pandemic for many people, if you choose to take that perspective and see it that way. But I think there's a lot of conveniences that were offered because of the pandemic that I think consumers are going to continue to demand going forward, right? So can I say Target on the podcast?
Yeah.
But Target brought their drive-up service, and I don't know if that existed in other parts of the country previously, but for
Target,
our area,
the store.
Yes.
Oh, I thought this is sponsored by Walmart. I'm just kidding. No, it's not.
I was going to say we're going to have to edit that out, but they came up with their drive-up service just as everything was getting intense with the pandemic, right? And I think that was a brilliant thing to keep consumers out of the store, but still serve them in a safe sort of way. And whether that was their intentionality or not, or whether this was something that was in the works and their planning beforehand, I think certainly that's going to be part of our new normal for long to come, because it's shown customers a side of convenience that maybe they didn't expect or know that they could get before. So a lot of these curbside services, I think, are going to be here to stay.
For sure.
We grew 300% in the number of vehicles that we sell completely online, meaning you've selected the car on the internet, you've gone through all of the price negotiation, you've
financing
you've selected your ancillary products, your insurance products you may or may not want, and submitted your credit information to a lender, gotten your approval, and signed the documents, except for I don't know, Jerry, 6 or 7 state mandated documents that we have to have a wet ink signature on. That process has grown 300% for us.
That's amazing.
And I think that's something that's going to be here to stay, as it should. So I don't think we're ever going to go back to completely normal, but I think we're going to find a new normal, and I think there's going to be more good that's come out of this than bad.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's really fast-tracked a lot of things that we were already kind of going down the path anyway, but this time it was like, okay, now we need to adapt, and we need to adapt like now. It's not like 6 months from now, or maybe like next year we'll kind of do it or whatever. Yeah, it definitely fast-tracked a lot of different things.
Well, it fast-tracked our online shopping process too, because I had really held that up thinking, I want it to be perfect. I want it to be perfect. I want it to look like this and function this way and do that. And so we had gone back to the drawing board, what feels like a zillion times, trying to tweak it and perfect it. And I remember, if it was March or April at the time, calling our lead guy on this project and just saying, you know what, Mike, it doesn't matter if it's right or not, just launch it. If it's broken, just launch it. We'll clean up the mess along the way, but we've got to get going because we don't know where this is going to go, and this may be the only avenue. And that was actually a really good thing for us, because sometimes you learn better and can refine better when you're in the middle of the mess than when you're looking at it from the outside. So, it pushed us along and forced us to move faster, and I'm glad it did.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point is, a lot of people, myself included, sometimes when you want to try to do something, or you're trying to make a move, or you're trying to make a change or something, you always kind of wait for all of the elements to fall in their place, and you don't really take action until it's like, well, this has to be right, and this has to be right, and this has to be right before I can do this. But sometimes, and in a lot of respects, it's like you just have to do it.
Yeah.
You just have to do it, whether it's you're at 100% or 80% or 70%. You just have to do it, and then you just kind of fix it along the way.
Yep. And I think we did it more effectively by doing it that way. So live and learn, right?
Yeah. I mean, because it's a process, I think, of just consistent refinement. Like a lot of times, especially like I don't know, I feel like this as a business owner is sometimes I feel like you're constantly working on like a flying airplane, and it's in flight, but you're still trying to work on it and trying to modify it as it's currently in flight, and that's a real challenging thing. But like, for you wake up early in the morning and you meditate or read, or what kind of, because it sounds like you're so busy, it sounds like you've got a super crazy schedule, what keeps you level? Like, what's the one thing that you think keeps you level?
I think that time in the morning. I mean, it is, I think it's critical to my ability to function that I have that quiet time in the morning that is just all to me, all to myself, where I can, and sometimes I'm reading trade publication articles, and sometimes I'm reading my Bible, sometimes I'm praying for an answer, but one way or the other, it's one spot in my day every day where it's quiet, the world is shut out, and it's just me, and I can center and focus and really be prepared for the day ahead.
Yeah, I mean, but I read somewhere where, they say that the best way to kind of start your day is to always say 3 things that you're grateful for, because that kind of gets you into a really nice mindset as you kind of launch the day, because so many things can be thrown at you. I can't even imagine being the CEO of how many dealerships do y'all have?
We have 18 rooftops and 22 franchises.
My goodness. I would imagine you get thrown curveballs every day.
It is never the same day twice. It is interesting every day. Yes.
And so, I've always heard that that's been a good practice. And it's something that I try to do also as a good practice in life is just to try to remember those just 3 things, just 3 little things that you're grateful for every day, and then it just kind of puts you in a nice little positive mindset.
For sure.
In terms of like dealing with stress, I don't know if it's, do you do exercise? Do you do a little bit of wine in them?
Some days are better than others in terms of dealing with stress. I will say every day this week I've said, okay, Mommy needs to go exercise. Mommy needs to go exercise because I've just been so wound up. But it's a variety of things. I think when I've got the especially intense stress, exercise is a great go-to because it's that physical, release. But certainly making time for my girlfriends and conversation and something that is just aside from work, aside from responsibilities, I think is so important. I think we all need time to just be and just delight in our surrounding and the people that we've been blessed with, in our lives. And so, sometimes it's a little more vigorous with exercise, and sometimes, it's surrounding yourself with wonderful people. I'm an extrovert for sure, so I get my energy, I get re-energized by being around other people.
Well, so you started in marketing, right? Or at least that's the way that you kind of started in the Bert Ogden arena, was in the marketing department. So by default, most marketing people are quite a bit of extroverts. And so I would assume that you know a lot of people and a lot of people know you. But is there like a, and I'm sure you have a wonderful support system. Who is, like, do you have that kind of one go-to person? Because I hear it's lonely, it can be very lonely at the top. Because you can't really talk about like all of the stresses and things, especially with, people that you work with in association with. But do you have like those go-to people?
Oh yeah, and I didn't get it many years ago, but yes, it is lonely at the top for sure, and that's okay. But yeah, there's a ton of people that but I can count on one hand how many people are in that tight inner circle that I can really, open up to and just kind of let those stresses go with.
Mm-hmm. And so, okay, I think the biggest question that I have, and it's a kind of easy, simple question, but kind of complicated to answer, I would imagine, is like, how did you do it? How did you get to the very top of the largest dealer group in the Rio Grande Valley? How did you become CEO?
You're right. That is not the simplest question to answer.
Right.
And really only because it's not a short journey to get there, but I'll tell you, so there's a motivational speaker who says, your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. And I think that's such a phenomenal saying. And I don't know why, but very early on in working here, I would watch Mr. Vacker and watch, the work that he did and how he would conduct this orchestra of ongoings and do it in such a way that you had this beautiful business moving forward and growing and flourishing and so many pieces, and he did so much of it by himself. And somewhere along the way, before I was even 20 years old, I got this idea in my mind that I can do this. I can do that someday I'd like to run these dealerships. But I never said that out loud to anyone because in my mind, what business do I have saying something like that? But it was a perpetual thought. It wasn't an intentional thought, but for whatever reason, it was a perpetual thought. And I continued to take advantage of opportunities that came my way and continue on in my education. And it was always a perpetual thought in the back of my mind. And so I think that is very true, that your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. And, I was quoted in an article one time as saying, I lack the capacity to mind my own business. And that is so true, but not in the gossipy sort of way, from the perspective that if there's a problem, I just can't sit still. I've got to dig in. I've got to, grab it, take ownership of it, and fix it. And I've got this opinion that, for whatever reason, I was called to this for a purpose, and it's a purpose that's bigger than me. It's an opportunity to make a really positive impact on a great number of people, and I take that very, very seriously. And so there's a very technical path to how I got here, and we could walk through stages and jobs and responsibilities and points of promotion and things like that. But I think that really at the core of it all was believing in yourself, having a clear direction of what you want to achieve, whether you really were clear about how you were going to get there or not. And one thing I don't think people ever talk about often enough is that you always need somebody in your corner. You always need somebody tugging you along. And I was very fortunate to have that encouragement and endorsement from Bob and Janet both. And so I think when all of those things come into alignment, there's nowhere you can't go.
There's nothing you can't do. Yeah, I totally believe that too. And I heard once, or I read once, that the successful people in life are, one thing that they're really, really good at is making good decisions. And those decisions then kind of take you into the place where the person is at because of a decision that they made along the way. Are there any certain, were there any points that you can kind of just like really think about where you said, man, if I didn't say yes to this, or if I because I said no to this, it opened me up for this? Because I always feel like life has a really funny way of, one day you can be interacting with somebody and it could completely change the trajectory of your entire life for it. But are there certain sort of decision-making moments that you kind of felt like, man, if I hadn't done that or been here or anything like that, like I wouldn't be here?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a variety of them. And the most important decision you ever make is the next one you're gonna make. For that exact reason. Every decision we make leads to the next. And y'all remind me of that whenever I order dessert tonight. But there was one point just out of high school where I got this remarkably unique idea that I was going to leave the Valley and move to Austin. For what? I don't know. Probably none of the right reasons.
Wait, how old were you when this happened? Because I had that same...
18, 19,
okay.
some ridiculous age like that. By the way, I was already working here, and for some reason, I can't remember how all the details worked out, but I moved half of my stuff to Austin. I put in my resignation. I do not know what I was thinking, and right now I can't remember for the life of me what turned that decision, but I ended up not going. And
really?
So that was interesting. I had to collect all my stuff and come back. And I'm so glad I didn't, because who knows, would I have completed college? I don't know. Would I have made the connections I made into some of my next jobs? Probably not. There was another point in time where I made the decision to leave the dealership, and that was very hard because this was this was my second family, and I felt very much at home here. I felt at the time I was kind of the baby of Bert Ogden, and very well taken care of, but I had the opportunity to go work for a very large national bank, and I was really curious, but also scared and hesitant. And Mr. Vacker gave me a glowing encouragement and endorsement, and he said, "Yeah, absolutely. You need to go see what's beyond the nest, right?" And I'm so glad that I did that, because that gave me a very different perspective on what other aspects of business look like, and what was possible, and what else my skill sets were, and if I had not gone and taken that job, I would probably still be working here, but I would not be sitting in this seat. I think I would most likely be sitting in the role of being a general manager. And let me tell you, that's a fantastic job to have, but I definitely enjoy the entrepreneurial nature of what I get to do more than if my life had gone in that direction, right? And so even leaving and then coming back set a whole different course for what I was going to be able to do. So, there's a ton of those decisions throughout your life. Yeah,
and I think that any one of those decisions always kind of changes your perspective on life just a little bit, right? Like it tweaks things up. And because you kind of came from that corporate structure, I would imagine that anything that you learned from there, you were like, hey, these are some really great ways that this company does it.
Well, yeah, I think that was one benefit I was able to bring into the dealership is, these dealerships grew so fast, which was so amazing. But sometimes when you grow that fast, it's hard to employ necessarily the corporate structure that you may want to. And so I think my having been in that environment gave me a unique perspective to help the stores achieve what they were looking for with that. And I don't know that I would have been as wise to be able to do that had I not had that other perspective. Because those kinds of things can definitely change the way that you look at things and the way that you suggest things and things like that. So you left and then you came back, but you didn't come back as a CEO. No, I came back as the corporate strategist, which was a variety of administrative work and dealing a lot with real estate and some open points and some acquisitions and kind of moving some things in a corporate direction. But it was definitely not the leadership role that I have today.
So it was more like operations?
I would call it much more administration.
Got it. Got it. And so how long were you in that until, I guess, the Vackers were like, Natasha?
So I'm the worst at remembering the timestamps on what happened when, but so I came back as the corporate strategist, which was a beautiful hodgepodge of many different administrative functions. And again, therein comes the lacking the capacity to mind my own business. And so I was grabbing this and grabbing that and taking on different things. And so then I moved into the role of the corporate administrator and really began working much more closely with Mr. Vacker, who was holding the title of CEO at the time. And it's really hard to say. I mean, I know what the timestamp is on the CEO position, but it's really hard to say exactly when that happened because it was just one of those things where I have a tendency to be such a take charge type of a person, which by the way, some people call that controlling, but I call it take charge personality.
I love the positive connotation behind that.
Yes, thank you. See, it's perspective.
That's right.
That, I was just very proactive about, taking things on and making decisions and, but very communicative with him about, this is what I think, this is what I think we should do, there's the outcomes that I see. And I think that that closeness and that connection, that communication gave him the confidence to say, okay, I'm ready to go ahead and relinquish this position to someone else. Because I'm sure that was not an easy thing for him to do as long as he's been doing it.
Yeah. And I mean...
And in a super hands-on sort of way. I mean, he's a very present and engaged owner.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what I picked up, through the years of being kind of in the automotive realm is that, and I mean, really it Mr. Vacker, at least from an outsider's perspective, from my perspective anyway, really drove the Bert Ogden name and expanded, I mean, under his leadership. So a lot of these dealerships, I would think that he would consider them his babies. And
well, he considers them all his babies, but yes, to your point, there was a certain number of dealerships, but the majority of the growth has happened with him and Janet at the helm of these dealerships.
Right.
Excuse me. And he's a tremendously capable and astute businessman, and so yeah, he's done a most excellent job, and he's done it, with both hands on the steering wheel. So I'm sure it was definitely a challenge for him to release a little.
Yeah, because letting go of that must have been really, really difficult, and so he must have had just a tremendous. Sounds like he had a tremendous
I hope I
amount
made
of
it a little
confidence.
bit easier, but
Well, and I mean, hey, look, from all of the numbers and everything that we're in, even in post-pandemic times, I mean, I look at all of those numbers, and I mean, y'all are kicking butt. I mean, breaking records left and right. There's just
we had 10 record-breaking months last year.
Did you really? 10 record break during COVID.
During COVID.
That is amazing. On multiple brands, on multiple.
On every level of business, yeah.
Man.
Yeah, it was not just, I mean, we definitely have certain shining stars throughout the organization, but talking about the organization as a whole, there was 10 out of 12 months where we just, broke our own best records and set new standards for ourselves. And, one thing that we talk to the team about all the time is, remember, bad habits can be developed during good times, and your good habits are developed during bad times, right? And so that's one of those humbling comments to remember how we behave differently when you're riding that wave or when things are difficult. And so I think certainly we refined some of our processes and procedures. Many of our metrics became better, and we really checked ourselves and held ourselves more accountable than ever during the pandemic, given all of that uncertainty. And it almost feels embarrassing to say that we hadn't done some of those things before, but the reality is when you had the severity of that circumstance placed upon you, everything went into overdrive in terms of positive accountability. And so now as we sit here and look at what the year behind us, has taught us and what the year ahead, we're going to face, we're really focused on things have been good. Let's not pick up any of those old bad habits again. Let's remember how we got here. Let's remember how those good habits we learned during those hard times served us and carry those forward.
Yeah, I mean, remarkable, like what you all have been able to do during a pandemic when everybody was just really scared and nobody really knew exactly where to go. You all just kind of kept charging forward, it sounds like.
I am so glad that that's what it looks like to you. I am so glad.
You're the duck on the water, and in the background you're like swimming frantically.
Yes, that's so true. I will tell you this, and I'm gonna completely deny it if any of our GMs watch this, but we had more conference calls than we've ever had before during the pandemic, and especially early on as we're trying to reorganize everything about the way that we do business, whether it's just internally with our own staff or externally with our guest. And a lot of this was very heavy for me. And, I knew I had absolute confidence in the decisions that we were making and executing, but there was still a bit of a fear factor of the unknown because, you know what you're doing is right, but is it right enough to overcome the challenges of this completely uncontrollable obstacle? And there was one time where, we were having a very matter-of-fact conference call about, how things needed to roll out, what needed to be done, and talking about, if we're not considered an essential business, if the sales department isn't considered an essential business and only services, this is how it's going to look. And there was one point where I had to excuse myself from the call, and I'm sure I said I needed to get a report or a number or something, but I put the phone on mute, and I just had to take a minute because I was trying to keep that smooth, cool, confident, demeanor about me as we led through. But there was this, moment of, is this enough? Is this going to be enough to get us where we need to be? And, so I took about 15 seconds to gather myself and then, took it off mute and off we went. But I'm so glad that it looked that smooth from the outside, because there were certainly moments, behind closed doors where it was a little bit less than smooth.
Yeah, I can imagine. Because how many employees do y'all have?
1,094.
1,090. Wow. Yeah. So I would imagine tons of scenarios were probably running through your mind if you all had to shut down, and all of the families and all of these things. And I mean, yeah, it's a big responsibility.
We may have 1,094 people employed, but when we talk about who we're responsible for, that number we talk about is closer to the 4,000 or 5,000 person range, right? Because for every employee that we have, they have a family who counts on them and depends on them, and they depend on us for a job. And so,
well, I think even beyond that, I mean, just beyond the people that are under your roof, the amount of people that you affect and the amount of business, the economic impact that you all have in this area is tremendous. I mean, you all sponsor community-wide events. You all have tons of different vendors. So it is very much a trickle effect of it, not just the internal core of the 4,000 or 5,000 people that you are directly in connection with, but all of the other people that are affected by anything that happens internally. So not to add more pressures, but I mean, just to really, when you look at it at that scope, I mean, wow, that's got to be quite the responsibility. And you've had a lot of success in your 3 or 4 year, going on 4 years, your 4 years at Bert Ogden. What are in
my defense, 22 years, I think, is how we count the Bert Ogden time. That's how we do the Bert Ogden math.
Is that the?
Yeah, that's how we do the Bert Ogden math. But within this position, yes.
Oh, okay, wait. So how old were you when you first got hired?
So don't tell any of the current employees because we don't do this anymore. But I was 15 when I
15
first
years
got
old.
hired here.
Oh, okay. All right.
And then
You were like Doogie Howser, and do you remember Doogie Howser? Is
yes,
that, am I dating myself?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Because if you are, I am too.
Okay.
Yes, I totally remember Doogie Howser. But yeah, I don't know if I was that sharp. But I started when I was 15, and then I was here until I was 23. And then I came back right after my son was born, and he's 9 now. He's about to be 10. Well, he'll be 10 in about 6 months, so I guess he's 9 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been back since then.
And you just had a birthday, right? So happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Thank you very
It
much.
is your birthday month still, I believe.
For 2 more days, yeah.
Do you-
2 more days, yes.
Is that the way you celebrate? Do you celebrate like that? Do you say like, oh, it's my birthday month? Or like, what do you do to treat yourself?
Do I have permission to
I
celebrate
think
my
you
birthday
can.
all
I think
month?
I mean, you're the CEO. You can do whatever you want.
Okay, well then I'm going to celebrate tonight and tomorrow and just make it the whole birthday month. But
Okay, well, invite me because no, actually, that's always real bad, right? Like, I always say, like, you should never invite yourself. Like, if you're not invited, just don't ask.
True.
Yeah. So what'd you do for your birthday?
Well, I was at the office, right? But that's okay because
Of
I have
course.
I have an amazing extended family at the office. And so if I'm honest, I don't know how much work got done that day because there was so much fun and so much celebrating. But you know what was really cool about my birthday was the night before my birthday, we had kind of like a pre-birthday get-together. So I guess I do extend my birthday out as I guess
allowable.
I jumped on into March there, but had like this pre-birthday get-together, and my kids decided that we should open a bunch of presents and have food, which was this giant debacle because the food never showed up. It was like 10 o'clock at night and we're ordering pizza. It was that part was a mess, but the kids wanted to play Pictionary, and so we divided up into 2 teams, and thinking like this was a kid-oriented thing, I very quickly learned that the adults were taking over.
But way more competitive.
Yes, but we divided into 2 teams and put our own spin on the rules to Pictionary, and it was super competitive and so hilarious because one of my girlfriends who is definitely a calming center for my, very intense personality, and she's always a calm spot for me. Next thing I know, she's to my left, and I was the one drawing. I started to erase the picture to draw the next one, and she like elbowed me and body blocked me out of the way, just made like this quick swipe across the board. There was remnants of the last picture behind, and she's just telling me to go in the bare spot. I'm like, where did you come from? But it was a great time, and we made some fantastic memories.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
That's super cool because, I mean, going from CEO to just like mom, right? I mean, that's
So important. That is so important. So my kids I don't think my kids know what my job title is. And they know where I work, and I think that they're somewhat impressed with that, as we drive around the valley and they see and they recognize the logo, and they see the car dealerships, and when the commercials come on TV, they're like, "Hey, mommy, look, that's your work." So they're somewhat aware, but they're not. Well, one, they're too young to really understand the hierarchy, but I don't behave that way at home, and I don't present that to them at home. And so there's been a few times where they'll come to the office with me for whatever reason, and someone will say, "Oh yeah, your mom's our boss." And I remember one time we got upstairs, and my middle son Connor, he's like, "Mommy, why did that man downstairs say that you're the boss?" And I was like, because that's really not a word that I use, right? And I have no desire to be a boss, right? But so I'm like, well, technically, I am responsible for, leading the direction on the decisions that, indicate where these individuals are going.
Did you
and
tell
I'm thinking,
them like that?
Well, and yes, and so I am very focused on speaking grown-up language to my children, and so my children have fantastic vocabularies, and their teachers have all told me that my children are very well able to articulate themselves and emotionally intelligent, able to articulate those emotions as well. However, that particular time, that particular sentence, I stood there and I thought, Yeah, I don't think that landed. I don't think that hit like that. And he looked at me, and that was really the moment I knew that it hadn't landed. And he said, "You're not the boss. You're just mom." And there was a part of me that was like, hey, wait a minute. But then there was a part of me that said, oh man, you're doing something right.
You're doing something right.
Yeah, and so I was like, you know what? At this young age, if I cannot possibly be the boss because I am nothing more than mom, then I'm doing something right. You get to be 16 or 17. We're gonna have another conversation if you say that to me again.
Right, yeah. Then you're gonna be like, you know who the boss is? Me. Yeah, that's gotta be a good balancing act to be able to do that. And then somewhere along, well, you've got that 1 hour, right, for time, Natasha time. What are some of the other things that you do to just kind of break away? Like how much of your life is revolved around being the CEO?
Quite a lot of it.
95%?
Yeah, I mean, I would say between my kids and work, I'd say that consumes probably 98%. Yeah, probably 98% of my time. But you find pockets here and there for things that are fun and interesting. And I'm definitely eager to get to a point where we can travel and go do things again and create new memories and create new experiences. But
you get vacation time? Do you?
Yes, I do.
And who do you have to ask for permission? Yourself?
Well, I mean, I guess technically I would be in charge of creating that calendar, but from a respect aspect, I've never gone on vacation without talking to Mr. Vacker so that he knows what's going on and where I'm going to be. But you know what? You got to be present where you're at and make the fun where you're at, right? And so that was actually really critical for me too during the pandemic, because suddenly you can't go do anything, right? And so, I think when you're surrounded by people that you love and that you enjoy investing your time in, when you have been privileged enough, and I'm going to use that word, I am so privileged to have a job that I'm passionate about, that, I never have a Monday, I never wake up and say, oh, it's Monday, I got to go to work, right? And I never have a Friday where I'm like, it's 4:59, got to go, right? Like, I love being there. Even though it is crazy and at times chaotic, and there's times where I'm like, what is going on here? This is just bananas, right? I love it, right? And so finding ways to have fun and be happy and be energized right where you're at. It's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the things, all the curveballs and all of the craziness, I think that those are always opportunities for you to be like, okay, this is different, right? Like the COVID thing. It's like, okay, well, rather than looking at it and saying like, oh crap, how am I going to deal with this? It's like, okay, well, here's an opportunity to learn. Going to be your first crisis that you've gone through, but hey, at the end of everything, you're going to be that much smarter, that much wiser, and what an adventure.
Well, and it's like we talked about the other day. I've never learned anything in a moment of being honored or acclaimed. I'm not saying those things aren't nice, but everything worth knowing that I've learned has happened, in times of adversity.
Right.
For sure. But on the topic of things I like, I will say I like anything I've never done before.
You like?
I like anything I've never done before. So I'm so excited for new experiences. So I'm always really eager to try something that I've never done before, and go places I've never been, and try foods I've never had. I just think the world is so big and we're so small, and there's so much of it out there. Like I just get really excited to try things I've never tried before.
So what's on your bucket list?
I have a 50-page bucket list.
Get out of here.
And I've never shown it to anyone.
Except for today.
I'll give you a few.
Okay, just a few.
I'll give you a few.
In no particular order.
Some of them are related to family, right? And those are very beautiful and very personal. One of the things on my bucket list had been to be nationally recognized for my efforts at work, and it's so funny because I'd written all these things down, and then when that happened, it didn't click. It was like
it wasn't mentally like a check mark.
Because I had written these down in a book, and I keep the book with me. But maybe I should look at it every day. I don't necessarily look at it every day, but one day I was like, I'm going to look through this and see, like, am I making progress towards these goals, these 50 things for me, it's actually 50 things I want to do before I'm 50 years old.
Oh.
And I was like, hey, I have done that. That's really, really awesome. Okay, so here's my most recent kind of funky thing that I really desperately want to do.
Okay.
I want to take my kids to Australia, and I want to go stay in a luxury tree house in Australia. Like, not a hotel, but like a full-blown in a tree. But let's just be clear, it will be glamping. It's not we're not gonna be roughing it.
Yeah,
but like a full-blown tree house in a tree, I want to sleep in a tree and have windows all around me and just see the open world and maybe a kangaroo or something.
Is that why Australia? Because like you want to wake up next to koala, or?
It's really about where first of all, I think that there would just be so many amazing things to see there, and certainly I think my kids would get a kick out of it, but it's got a higher concentration of luxury tree houses than some of these other places, but because I am talking like a legit tree house.
Yeah, so like almost Avatar-ish, where you're just like hanging out on the tree and then you just sleep, but in a nice... I know Disney World has something like that. It's probably not Australia-ish, but yeah, I hear Australia is definitely... That's pretty awesome. I didn't even know that existed.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
It's a thing. Okay, what else is a thing? What else? What's one of the other ones?
What is one of the other ones? Okay, so...
Because it sounds like you crave adventure.
I do crave adventure, and my 9-year-old asked me the other day, he said, Mommy, is this picture, this is you? And I said, yeah, baby, that's me, and I'm skydiving. And he says, Mommy, can I go skydiving? And I said, no, absolutely not. But when you're 18, we'll have this conversation again. And so now he's asked me like every day for a week, like, Mommy, can we go skydiving? You'll go with me when I'm 18? I'm like, yeah, for sure. I will go with you when you're 18. So yes, I do crave adventure.
When did you go how old were you when you went skydiving?
Early 20s.
Oh, okay.
Early 20s. And so to that point, what is being said between the lines here, you're not actually saying, is I did, as I'm telling my son, yes, we're going to go, I thought to myself, there's a different level of maturity and resolve regarding your responsibilities and safety and danger when you are early 20s.
For sure.
To a little bit older than
right.
early 20s.
Little old, just a little bit older.
Just a little bit older. And will I still have the courage to just jump out of a plane when he's 18? But I think I will, because it'll mean if he still wants to do it, because it'll mean something to him.
Well, and I think also, there is a certain sense when you're in your 20s, it's like you've got like invincibility.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's like you've got like this invincibility where you're like, nothing's going to happen to me. Like I could do whatever I want. And then somewhere between 20 something and 30 something, you're like, oh man, I'm kind of fragile. Like I don't want to do that. Or
you know what it was for me? It's kids. That for me, it was the point of having kids, because prior to that, there's no one that's dependent on you, right? And then after that, if something happens to me, you have these 3 little beautiful lives hanging in the balance, and so I got to be a little more careful with myself.
Yeah, and I think for me too, I'm like the same way, where like I think to myself, okay, there's a statistic out there that says like somebody's not going to make it, and more than likely I'm going to fall in that statistic, and then people are going to say, what did Jerry do? Like, why would he do something like that? And I just know that that's going to be me, so I just kind of abstain from.
No. We're going to work on your positive mental attitude. Yes. I'm the one that's convinced that I'm going to defy those odds.
So okay, well that makes sense. That makes sense. So life lessons. What would you say, like, what are some of the things that your parents kind of instilled in you that now you're instilling in your kids?
Oof. In all honesty, Jerry, I had a very rocky upbringing, and so I would not say that that's necessarily the avenue where I received pearls of wisdom from.
So hard knocks, like you kind of learn through certain experiences, like, okay, you should do that or don't do that, and then from that's kind of how you started to pick up things.
Yeah, we'll put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll put it that way.
Okay.
But yeah, it's definitely a challenging upbringing. But there's so many. I don't know how you even begin to impart all the life lessons, on young people or on kids. But so here's one that is kind of controversial to some people. But I've got several friends that are single females that are younger than me, and sometimes are kind of wondering, when is that next phase of my life going to begin? And I think a lot of us have grown up with this, and I know I certainly did, with this attitude that you grow up, you get married, you have a family, and that is what it is. And I even had some of that very early on, and there were things that it did not occur to me that I could do, and I think I made some decisions that kind of held me back from time to time, and so I see a lot of these young girls sometimes thinking that there's a time frame on some of these things, and just really trying to show them that there's no time frame on it, and the best investment you can ever make is an investment in yourself, and it just makes you so much more valuable. I have this T-shirt that my kids give me, and it said "Raising Kind Humans," and I snicker when I see that
That's
T-shirt.
Awesome.
Well, I snicker when I see that T-shirt because when they're bickering, I'm tempted to go put it on and be like, "Remember this?" But that's another one too. There's things that I was not allowed to do as a child. Like, there would be no running in the house. There would be no, yelling or screaming or rambunctiousness. And I'm not a big fan of the yelling and screaming, because it's a lot.
It puts you on edge, right?
Right. But I could care less if my kids run in the house. I could really care less. And, we're going to go outside and we're going to play hard, and I'm going to play hard with you. And I'm not hugely overly excited about strict bedtimes and some of these things that I grew up with, but the deal breaker for me is, what is the state of your moral character, right? The decisions you make today about moral issues completely determine the man or the woman that you're going to become, right? And so when we talk about how you behave and how you treat one another and how you treat other people around you, I'm not concerned with, who you're going to be right now. I'm concerned who you're going to be your whole life, right? So really focusing on being kind, being mindful of others, thinking of others ahead of ourselves, and things of that nature.
Wow. And those are all just fundamental things that are sort of the pillars of what ends up making a person who they are. So for that person who is, hopefully one day they're looking at this and they look at you and they say, I want to be her. I want to be Natasha. Like, what one piece of advice would you give them if they said, I want to be a CEO one day. I want to be able to be a good mom and a strong leader and all of the things that you are. What would you say?
I would tell you, the first thing you've got to do is make your mind up that you're going to succeed. You have to make your mind up that you're going to succeed, and you've really got to believe that, right? Because you can't get where you're going if you don't know where you're going, right? So you have to make your mind up that that's where you're going to go. You've got to be able to envision it, and you work every day towards it, right? You don't just go from 0 to 100, in one step. So, we talked before about decisions leading to the next decision, and that's why I love that saying that the most important decision you're going to make is your very next decision, right? And so make your mind up about who you want to be or what you want to be or whatever that looks like, and then be intentional in those decisions, right? Something I tell my kids all the time is that the easy decision and the right decision are usually not the same decision, right? And so we can do the easy thing, and it's going to feel good for about a second, right? But it's not going to take us where we're trying to go. So, I really believe that statement that our lives are moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts, and I think that there's great power in having a vision for your life. So make up your mind what you want to do, and then just start working towards it one little step at a time.
That's awesome. Well, on the next podcast, if you're up for it, I'd like to know more about your what else is on your bucket list. And then there's like a ton of things. There's a ton of questions and things that I have. I know that you're really, really busy, so I really appreciate
you
your
asked
time.
me one. I'm going to give you one.
Okay.
And it's very vulnerable. This is very vulnerable to say that, but I want to write a book.
Really?
I want to write a book. I want to be a published author.
And what would the book be about?
Can't tell you.
We'll just have to wait for the book.
You'll have to wait for the book.
We'll just have to wait for the book.
Yeah,
well, you know what? I have all the confidence in the world that one day I'm going to be at Barnes & Noble. Probably it's going to be online.
I will be the one that took you there to say, Jerry, you need to read this book.
Well, you're going to have to sign it, and then I'm going to be I'll be the first one in line at your book signing.
All right, awesome.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.
To a great podcast and a great year, and thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Jerry.